Our next guest is Elle Duncan, a good friend of ours and certainly well known as a preeminent ESPN Sports Center host, also from Atlanta. And we certainly wanted to talk to Elle about a number of things, including what happened at the College Football Hall of Fame the other day, which had to be difficult for everyone to watch. Elle, first of all, thank you. Great to have you on, and I hope you're well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Paul, for having me and engaging in tough conversations. And, I'm always happy to talk to you, Paul.
Well, let's talk about this because I for somebody who talks for a living, I find myself struggling to talk about this other than to listen because you think you know a lot and then you find out very quickly, Elle, in my case, you don't know very much at all. So how has it been for you through the prism of your eyes, your experiences watching really the last week in America?
Yeah, so first of all, I would say that it's okay, Paul. Like, I think in a country where we consistently and constantly embrace debate and everyone has an opinion, it's okay to admit that you don't have opinion on something that you've never experienced. And I think really honestly, that's what Black people are asking of white people. We're asking you to just simply listen. A lot of the frustration that you're seeing, well, none of us condone, violence. And I would say that there is a difference between the protesters and the rioters. There are. You see countless demonstrations, peaceful demonstrations, and then you see, frankly, people who are there to be opportunistic, who are looting, but they're not the same. But a lot of the rage and frustration that you're seeing is that we still have to convince some people that racism even exists. I mean, we're still having to look for validation from people that it is still a thing, despite the fact that there is 400 years of evidence to prove that there are racial injustices done consistently through time to people of color, but specifically to Black people. And when I've had a lot of white friends reaching out to me, friends and family reaching out to me over the last few days, really trying to inquire about the same thing that you're asking, my experiences and what that's like. And I've said this to them in a way that I hope is palatable and hopefully to some of your listeners as well, some of them that are still staunchly saying, all lives matter and whatnot. Here's what I'm trying to say to you. Why do you go to a doctor, Paul? You go to a doctor because you are not a medical expert. You go to a doctor because a doctor is trained to know what you don't know. They've spent years in school, years in service to make sure that they can help you come to a conclusion about your health and your livelihood. So Black people are the foremost authority and experts at being Black. And if we are telling you that there is a problem, if we are telling you that we face prejudice every day, then there is a problem. It's not up for debate. Listen to us. We know better than you know what it is to be a Black person. And the worst of it, Paul, the worst of it is being murdered in the street by a police officer. But what you're witnessing is death by 1,000 cuts. It is going to a Marshall's or a TJ Maxx or a nice store and undoubtedly having a white person come up and ask you for a price check because you have to work there to be there. It is walking down the street with your friend to go to a bar and minding your business because you just left a Red Sox game and having a truck full of dudes pull up next to you and start saying Heil Hitler. It is going to a beautiful resort that you worked your butt off to be able to afford and having a group of people call hotel security on you so that they can check that you're actually staying there and reminding you it's a private beach because they can't actually believe that you're there. It is going to a restaurant or going to a wedding and having white guilt, which is a white person that wants so badly for you to know that they love Black people that they run over every time a rap song comes on and they show you they know all the words. It's just constant and consistent. It is always being made aware that you are the minority. It is always being, when you're minding your own business, being told or being made sure that you understand that you do not belong. It is always trying to disarm yourself. It is telling your child when they walk into a store, keep your hands up if you're Black so that they don't think that you're stealing. It's walking into a restaurant and it's like a record rips and everyone is staring at you. It's knowing that at many restaurants, because I was a server, that the servers are in the back playing papers, rock, scissors over who has to take your table because they have a perception that Black people don't tip. It's that kind of stuff, Paul. It's at its simplest, that's what it is. And at its worst, it is being killed by a police officer. And so you are just seeing generational trauma. Look at these protests. There's 15-year-olds crying, along with 60-year-olds crying. I'm listening to the anguish in my mother's voice because she was part of those civil rights protests back in the 60s, and she remembers having the water hoses turned on her, and she remembers having a white lady push her off of a water fountain when she was 4 years old because it was a whites only, and my mom couldn't read at 4 years old and didn't know. So it is sustained and generational, and it is so much pain and anguish, and it is just asking for not only for you all to just listen to us, but stand by us, help us. We don't wish any of this for you. We're glad that you don't have to deal with what we have to deal with, but we want you to be outraged with us that this is happening to us, and that's what it is. We can't change it ourselves, because if we could, don't you think it would have happened by now? So outside of just even making people understand that this is real and this is how we live our life, we can't get you many people to even understand or think outside of their own reality. And praying it away and wishing it away and hoping it away and idealizing it away, those things don't work, Paul. They don't work anymore. Just because you were raised to not be prejudiced or to not have prejudices against people, just because you were raised to look at people for who they are as opposed to the color, that's not how it is for everybody. That is not everyone's reality. So you have to take yourself out of the situation and recognize the privilege that comes in that. And I think that we've experienced for so many years, white people in particular, my good friends, get incredibly defensive when you ascribe what white privilege is. Well, I grew up in the same neighborhood as you. You know we're not privileged. That's not what it means. It simply means that you have the privilege of escaping to ESPN to solely focus on sports and ignore what's happening. That you have the privilege of not talking to your son about at what age he becomes a threat. He goes from cute to a threat. That you have the privilege of being able to say to your child, if you get pulled over if you get pulled over by a police officer, here are the things that you need to do to make sure you stay alive. You will not have to have those conversations with your children. Many of your listeners will not, and that's what we mean by privilege. So all we're asking is that you listen and you receive this message.
Elle, I'm speechless because I know you well, and I learned, sadly, my fault. I think I learned more about you in this conversation than the countless times we've been together privately and on the air. And I want to thank you for that. But so I ask you, on behalf of everyone else, we're listening. What else can we do?
You know, there's a lot of things that you can do. Say to yourself, how many times, and again, whether you have listeners right now that are listening or not that feel a certain type of way about people of color or black people, you know your friends that have problematic thinking. You know your family members that are racist. You understand what that is. Call it out. It starts there. It starts by making your situation uncomfortable. It starts by someone saying something bigoted and you calling it out and undoubtedly making the situation weird because you guys were at the barbecue together and all anybody wanted to do was have a good time. That's where it starts. It starts by when your organization or the place that you work has a diversity and inclusion conference or meeting, recognizing that you should be involved in those conversations as well. It's when you go to work at a place, when you're being recruited for a job, asking, how many executives are people of color? What does it look like? How is this company comprised? It's asking the questions that we ask all the time, because if it's important to you, it becomes more important to everybody else. It's signing petitions. It's donating to causes that are solely and specifically trying to help marginalized people. It's having frank conversations like this with people of color that you know. That's what it is. Doing research. I joked the other day on Twitter, I know people that will do more research into who's got the hottest yoga spot in town than they will how they can help change the world. And there's a Google Doc going around right now that was comprised of white women who decided to put something together that's very much, a list of actionable things that white people can do to be allies. But it starts there, having conversations and calling it out, talking to your children about the fact that it's not enough to just not be racist. You have to be vocally anti-racist. And that's where it starts. And if we can start there, then it's certainly doing a lot more than we've done before.